This will bring us to information session item J2, information of the draft school reopening plan. Dr. Kimberly, will you introduce this item, please?
Yes, thank you and good evening, President Dodd, members of the board and the viewers at home. The reopening of schools under the state's guidelines relating to the pandemic is complex. And in some operations of the school, it's impossible. You will see that the traditional aspects of school are non-existent during the pandemic response plan. On-campus lunch and transportation for general education students are not included due to the inability to maintain social distancing. Accommodations of students and staff to account for any vulnerable person situations create an entirely new, complicated scenario. The basic definition of school is open is redefined to meet pandemic protocols. Highlighting our plan to reopen schools when it is safe to do so is the purpose of this presentation. We heard this week from Dr. Cameron Kaiser that Riverside County is moving backwards in both positivity rate and case rate for COVID-19. The metrics within our district are, as shown on the screen, higher than in the countywide statistics. This is a reflection of District 1, Supervisor Kevin Jeffrey's district. As you can see, the positivity rate in the bottom left-hand corner, as well as the case rate for COVID-19 are higher than the rest of the county. Currently, if we were looking at District 1, we would be in worse shape, if you will, based upon our current situation. More importantly tonight, we are seeking direction from the board on 4 converging efforts. First, the draft school reopening plan you are about to receive is our best chance to meet health orders, state and federal guidelines under pandemic conditions through June of next year. Second, to answer the question we hear most from parents, what will student schedules look like when in-person learning resumes? We will update you on student schedules, needed operational changes in elementary, middle, and high school, currently under negotiations with the Lake Elsinore Teachers Association and the California School Employees Association and its Chapter 598. I want to thank our faculty and staff for the effort and flexibility to create a distance learning environment with students' needs coming first. Many people have sat on committees since last March looking at requirements to meet state guidelines. Both associations also deserve thanks for their understanding and compassion for students and staff. Third, a resurvey of all parents and guardians is necessary to determine who wants to keep their children in a 100% distance learning environment once at least some in-person instruction is allowed. In an effort to recognize the 4,000 families who enrolled in distance learning last summer, we found our survey created confusion. Parents wanted to see what student schedules may look like before they made a decision in regards to the future. Due to Facebook posts, some parents enrolled who were not among the original 4,000, which didn't give us an accurate number. Fourth, in tonight's action session on this item, we will recommend a special meeting to be held within the next 2 weeks to finalize the district's school reopening timeline, as well as daily student schedules to complete our reopening plan. With that, I would like to introduce Mr. Jim Ujavitz to go over our health and safety element of our plan. Mr. Ujavitz, if you would, please.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberly. As detailed in the plan being presented tonight, Maintenance and Operations has taken several steps to ready our schools for when we return. Back in May, in accordance with the guidelines from CDE, the California Department of Public Health, and the Riverside Department of Public Health, we developed cleaning and disinfecting procedures to address COVID-19 concerns in classrooms, offices, or wherever students and staffs occupy. We then had our cleaning and disinfecting procedures reviewed and confirmed by Bainbridge Environmental Consultants as effective in cleaning and disinfecting for COVID-19. Since May, our cleaning and disinfecting protocols, since we've gotten our protocols, we've held a mix of 8 in-person and video conferencing trainings and informational sessions with our custodians, including on how to use the disinfecting misters now available at all sites and support buildings. Once our in-person school schedules are in place, we'll be able to work with our custodians to adjust daily runs to properly clean and disinfect for COVID-19. All sites now have multiple disinfecting carts for our custodial cleaning staff to use when cleaning and disinfecting high-touch common areas, soap dispenser refilling, and to address other cleaning situations as they occur. We'll also be taking steps to increase outside air ventilation into our classroom and buildings by doing the following. HVAC units will be turned on about an hour prior to staff coming on site to increase overall air ventilation. When possible, windows and doors will be left open to increase air circulation. And from January to June this school year, we'll be changing out our HVAC filters monthly on roughly our 4,500 units across the district. We normally do this quarterly. Now to discuss PPE supply protocols under the health and safety element of our plan, I'll turn it over to Philip Dominguez, Director of School Support Services.
Thank you, Jim. The district is committed to procuring and distributing personal protective equipment, as noted in the reopening draft. PPE is very important to help maintain the safety of all. In this draft is a list of recommended PPE by the various agencies that include face masks, hand sanitizers, touchless thermometers, and so forth. However, we are not just limited to these items. Each school site has been provided with an initial quantity of PPE supplies. As we anticipate the reopening of our schools, we have asked each school site to provide us with an updated inventory count to ensure they have the necessary inventory. Most schools have an excellent supply. In addition, we have committed to keep a well-stocked warehouse of those PPE items. Purchasing and warehouse team have done an outstanding job in staging and inventory in preparation for the reopening of our schools. Next, to discuss our transportation element, we will hear from Jean Durham, Director of Transportation and Facility Services.
Thank you, Phil. Transportation staff actually began the process of identifying challenges and developing protocols for the transporting of students during COVID-19 as early as May. We've taken into consideration recommendations and guidelines from both CDE as well as CDC. In addition, we have gleaned best practices from operators of both private and public school bus fleets throughout the state. We have included many of the practices in developing our protocols that they have instituted, but we have tailored them to meet the unique needs of our district. As you can see, our PPE, as well as our cleaning and disinfecting protocols, are in alignment with practices adopted by our other departments. This includes the use of electrostatic misters that will be used multiple times throughout the day on all vehicles that may have transported students. Staff have and will continue to receive training on the use of these electrostatic misters, as well as other recommended cleaning practices prior to implementing transportation protocol. Now, to discuss the district's food and nutrition program under the school's reopening plan, we will hear from Arlene Sanchez, Chief Business Official, Administrative and Fiscal Support Services.
Thank you, Jean. Although the method of delivery has changed during COVID-19, our Food Services Department continues to provide for the nutritional needs of our students. Since March, Food Services has incorporated safety guidelines to ensure the overall health and safety of staff, students, and families, reinforcing protocols set forth by public health officials. Provisions of meals will look different under various phases of our school reopening. While schools remain in full distance learning at all grade levels, we will continue with the grab and go breakfast and lunch pickup every Tuesday and Thursday from 8 to 9 in the morning at the 9 designated schools that you see listed on the screen. When schools reopen for in-person instruction, Food Services will remain steadfast in meeting all safety and health guidelines as set forth by the California Department of Public Health. We will be eliminating self-service stations such as salad bars. We will be distributing food to students in a manner that will allow for physical distancing as well as contact-free distribution to the extent possible. That will include individually bagged or prepackaged food. Where mealtime is a part of the in-person instructional day, there will be designated areas on campus where staff and students may pick up their meals and eat. The picture on the screen shows an outdoor tented area that will be utilized as a lunching area with social distancing of tables and seating. With the AM/PM in-person instruction option, meals will be distributed daily as students exit campus. This will allow students to eat in the comfort of their homes. To discuss our COVID-19 screening, exposure notification, and testing protocols, we will now hear from Dr. Kip Meyer, Assistant Superintendent, Students and Instructional Support Services, accompanied by our Nursing and Health Specialist, Jennifer Edquist.
Good evening. Before we begin, I too would like to acknowledge the collaboration that has occurred among the Riverside University Health System, the Riverside County Office of Education, and our district staff. We would not be in this position today without this united collaboration. Coming out of the 1920 school year, the district's communications partner, Parent Square, developed a daily health screening protocol that has been used by district staff members to report any COVID-related symptoms prior to reporting to their work. If a staff member has any symptoms that morning, he or she should actually work from home that day. For convenience, the daily health screening tool can actually be electronically filled out each day from any staff member's computer or device, inclusive of their cell phone. The ability for staff to fill out this form daily on the Parent Square app has also been received very well. On a daily basis, there are approximately 875 submissions of staff members who are reporting to work. As schools reopen, this daily health screening tool will also be extended to our families and students for them to fill out their screening report to identify any COVID-related symptoms if their child is to attend school that day. This protocol has been very effective as district nurses have partnered with supervisors and the personnel office to offer additional support and guidance to staff members who have experienced any symptoms. As reopening occurs, students and families who report symptoms will also be supported in a similar manner. It will be critical for our families and staff to continue their partnership as we maintain safe schools for our students and staff. In addition to the daily health screening tool, since August, staff members, students, and/or visitors have been expected to take their temperature as they arrive at district facility. As schools reopen, we will also continue to expand the temperature taking expectation as students, staff, and visitors arrive their site or workstations. Jen?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to review the COVID-19 exposure and notification and talk a little bit about the measures that we're going to take when a student, staff member, or teacher presents with COVID symptoms, if they're COVID positive, or if they've had a recent close contact exposure with somebody who is COVID positive. If a student or staff were to present to school with COVID-19 symptoms, they would be sent home and we would recommend testing. In this instance, the school or the classroom would remain open. If we have a student or a staff member who has close contact with somebody who is confirmed to have COVID-19, and close contact would be defined as somebody who came into contact with someone who had COVID positive they had contact for longer than 15 minutes at a distance of less than 6 feet, so that would be close contact. We would have them, we would send them home, and we would recommend they quarantine for 14 days from the date of their last exposure, and we would also recommend testing. It's important to note that even with a negative test, they would be expected to quarantine throughout that 14-day quarantine period, and in that case, the school and the classroom would remain open. If we did have a student or a staff who presented to school and ultimately were determined to have a COVID-19 positive test, we would consult with the local public health department to determine next steps, which would include isolating the case excluding from school for 10 days, which would be throughout that symptomatic period. We would also work with public health to identify those close contacts of that COVID positive case, and they would be instructed to quarantine. In the school setting, close contact, like I said, would be defined as anyone who had more than 15 minutes at a distance of less than 6 feet, but it would also include, for example, a cohort, so maybe a classroom of individuals, and that's because they spend a significant amount of time together indoors. But again, we would work with public health to determine those close contacts, and those individuals would then quarantine. We would recommend for testing. And then, of course, the area that COVID positive case was in would be disinfected and cleaned. Like Dr. Meyer was talking about, we do have that Parent Square app that we're utilizing right now for our staff members, and it's working wonderfully. We plan to use it for our students, and it's really important with that screening app that we identify individuals with symptoms of illness or those who have a fever or recent close contacts, and ensure that they not show up to a school or a work site. We are prepared, though, because we do understand that symptoms can present at any point during the day, and it's very likely that someone might feel good in the morning, and they may start to develop symptoms halfway through the school day. So in that case, we will have designated isolation areas on each campus, so we can separate anyone who does exhibit COVID-19 symptoms, and then we would have them picked up and transported home. These individuals would remain under continuous supervision, and if they were to develop critical symptoms of COVID-19, we would call 911 to ensure that they got prompt medical attention. And Dr. Meyer?
Thank you. As schools physically reopen to in-person instruction, the California Department of Public Health has recommended a testing protocol for all school districts to follow to ensure a continued focus on the safety of students, staff, and our families. Currently, the district has entered in a partnership with the Riverside University Health System to begin voluntary testing for staff and students. The Lake Elsinore Storm Stadium has health department staff on site for not only staff, but also for our students and families to be tested. In addition, last month, a mobile lab was dispatched to the Ortega conference room, allowing the health department's staff to test our staff members in district as they were looking to expand the testing system beyond the Storm Stadium. We look forward to expanding these mobile labs in our district to offer additional testing at convenient locations. For example, as the district reopens to in-person instruction, all staff must be tested once every 2 months. To support this protocol, not only will the district continue the partnership with the Riverside University Health System, but the district shall also partner with CISC, our liability carrier, to implement additional testing as well. To support the CISC partnership, Phil Dominguez, our Director of School Support Services, will be our point person as he ensures compliance with these recommendations. Jen?
Okay, so previously I talked about instances where individuals would need to be quarantined or isolated. And so as far as returning back to school after that quarantine period, I'm going to talk about the different scenarios for an individual being able to return back to school. So for somebody who had close contact with a confirmed COVID-19 case, they would be able to return back to school or their work site at least 14 days after their last exposure, and so long as they remain symptom-free throughout that quarantine period. For individuals who are COVID positive, they would be able to return back to school after their symptoms have substantially improved or resolved, and they are fever-free for at least 24 hours, and if it's been at least 10 days since their symptoms first appeared or from their last COVID positive test. It's important to note that they have to meet all 3 criteria in order to return. And then those individuals who we send home because they do have symptoms, they would be able to return back to school with a negative COVID test after their symptoms resolved and after they've been 24 hours free of fever. Also, to individuals who we might send home with symptoms, they could be returned back to school with a healthcare provider's note confirming an alternative diagnosis. With that note, they would also need to be symptom-free, fever-free for 24 hours. And that's important because we do understand that not everybody who goes home with symptoms of COVID is ultimately going to be diagnosed with COVID. There are lots of different viruses and bacteria that can cause illness. And so individuals will be able to reassess by their healthcare provider. And if they're diagnosed with something different, they could in fact return to school earlier than they would be able to if they were COVID positive. The health staff will review these notes, and they will actually review or clear students back to school after they've been excluded for COVID-19. And the reason for that is to ensure that we're following school policy and that we're adhering to all public health guidelines.
Thank you, Jen. What is the guidance on school closure? Once schools reopen, individual schools may actually have to close and revert back to distance learning based on the number of COVID cases. The actual percentage of students and staff who test positive. With each positive COVID case, there will be direct consultation with the local health officer. Individual school closures may actually occur if multiple cohorts of students have been exposed to the COVID virus, or if a school may also have to close, reverting to distance learning, if 5% of the student and staff cases are actually within a 14-day period. Each site, of course, will be handled differently depending on their size and their physical layout. Another question: when would a school be reopened if they were to be closed? Typically, a school would be able to reopen in 14 days if we follow these steps: cleaning and disinfecting, a public health investigation, with that continued consultation with our public health officials. Would our whole entire school district ever have to close? The recommendation thus far is for a superintendent to close the district if 25% or more of the schools have been closed due to COVID cases that have occurred within a 14-day period. Much like a school to be reopened, the district may reopen 14 days later if those steps outlined previously have been taken. It's important to note that the district shall always make these decisions in alignment with the public health officials. Next, to summarize our social and emotional wellness support plan, we will hear from Felipe Flores, our mental health program specialist.
Thank you, Kip. So with our social emotional learning, we are continuing to support our kids, and our social emotional support providers have been working in the classrooms through distance learning. So they've been into classrooms. We have seen them reach out into our 13 elementary schools with 143 teachers between the 5 teachers providing the supports. So they're reaching approximately 2,786 students through this program currently. So this is going into the Zoom classes, working alongside the teachers in the classrooms already. This is an increased support to our students in our elementaries. Further, the teachers have been providing, our SEL support providers providing trainings, bi-monthly trainings to our teachers and support staff who choose to participate. And then this last one we had at the end of September, we had 80 people participate in that training, which is great because more people are learning about the social emotional well-being of our students and our children. So they're able to support and understand the needs of our kids as we go forward. Just in terms of understanding social emotional learning and understanding the social emotional aspects of our kids, we are teaching them things in ways of how to cope with situations. It's important for our students to understand coping skills and how to deal with these challenges, and especially in where we're at right now with uncertainty of returning to school, wanting to return to school. The kids have a lot of things going on for them, so our providers are able to help them manage some of those feelings and thoughts that are going on and learn how to cope with the changes that are happening in our world. At home, parents, if you'd like to help your kids out with some of the social emotional things, you want to check in with them, see how they're feeling. And it's okay for them to have feelings that are scared. And we come to the point of comforting them and offering them support, of asking them why they feel that way, help them understand it, and then also help them process through it. It's okay for them to be uncomfortable. It's okay for them to feel different right now, because right now is different. And we want to understand that. We want to help them support through those things. If we move to our mental health team, they are continuing to support our most severe students in our tier 3 programs, in our alternative ed programs. So our mental health team supports them, as well as some other students who are on IEPs. We have been providing those supports all through the closures, and we will continue to do so. We are also doing some outside referrals to other programs. If you see on your screen there, it says Care Solace. Care Solace has been a great support to us. We've been able to provide a lot of supports to parents through the Care Solace program. We have the information on our website. We really encourage parents to look at the website. We have a lot of information there, and we're updating it as new things come in. Just yesterday, I posted something for parents who have students with ADHD and how to deal with them during the COVID crisis. That came from the CDE, and when that's on the website now. So please, if you have time, look at the resources we have there. We also want to understand and recognize, and also thank the board at the same time for increasing our intern program for MSWs. We are able to now support, we have 42 referrals for our intern program, which means that there's general education students are getting support in the area of counseling as well. Primarily in our K-5, but we have kind of stepped out of that box to support students because of the unique times that we're in. Our school counselors are also providing supports, and so are school psychologists. So we want to recognize them for their work as well. Again, we do really want to do our best to support our kids. So please, if there are things that are happening in your home that are scary, that your kids are maybe are feeling things, there's help out there. We want to help. There's a lot of resources on our website. There are resources for suicide prevention on our website. There's resources for text lines if they don't want to talk. We have resources on our website really to help for local places that can help and triage and just really meet the needs of our students in our community as we go through these times. We are your partner in educating your kids, not only on the education academic side, but also in our social emotional needs, and we want to continue to do so. At this time, I'd like to introduce Tracy Sepulveda, our Assistant Superintendent of Personnel Support Service, to present the 2020-2021 hybrid and distance learning models and school schedule options.
Thank you, Felipe. Good evening. It's my pleasure to present on learning models, as it is a critical piece and one of utmost interest in the reopening plan. I want to reiterate that our first priority when thinking about returning to sites and considering schedules is making sure staff and students will be safe. As all of you know, we opened the 2021 year in phase 1, distance learning for all was the approved learning model. All of our staff and students are to be applauded on the quick transition and how quickly they became accustomed and skilled in distance learning. With the statistics for Riverside County that Dr. Kimberly shared at the beginning of this presentation, and the possibility of returning to the purple tier, we are unsure of when we will be able to move to phase 2 and the next learning model. But we do know we must plan and be prepared well before we receive that green light. Preparing for phase 2, a hybrid or cohort learning in-person model, is quite complex. There are many factors that must be considered and accommodated. A few of these factors are, and some of the parents that spoke during the communication sessions mentioned some of these. We need to receive the results of the parent survey. We need to know the number of students wishing to remain or needing to remain on a distance learning model. We also need to know the number of certificated and classified staff needing to continue with distance learning or working virtually. Then we need to look at the number of students per grade level for cohort or hybrid learning model at each site, and then match them up with the number of staff at each site that are able to teach and or support a cohort hybrid model. Those are just a few of the factors that we need to consider. Again, putting the puzzle together is quite complex. As a district, we've been working with reopening committees at each of the levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. And these committees consist of administrators and teachers from all of the levels. These committees have been providing input and ideas as we are looking to create the best hybrid or cohort learning models for our students. The goal is to keep staff and students safe. We're looking to lessen the amount of disruption for staff and students, and we're trying to allow students to remain connected to their home site, regardless of the learning model that is best for them. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Rita Post, Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction, to present some of our elementary cohort learning model samples.
Rita? Thank you, Tracy. Tonight I'll be sharing 3 schedule options. All 3 schedules have a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. As defined by California Department of Education, synchronous learning takes place in real time with delivery of instruction and/or interaction with participants, such as live whole class, small group, or individual meetings via an online platform or in person when possible. Asynchronous learning occurs without direct simultaneous interaction of participants, such as videos featuring direct instruction of new content that students can watch on their own time. Our Lake Elsinore Unified School District students have access to a large number of programs that can be used during asynchronous time. Teachers are able to collect data from most of these programs to help them meet individual student needs. Some of these programs would be our National Geographic digital components for our language arts curriculum, our Go Math curriculum. We have Lexia, Power Up, Imagine Math, Imagine Learning, Prodigy, ABC Mouse, Epic, Science A through Z, Khan Academy, Kids Discover, Moby Max, Raz Kids, Vocabulary, Zern, IXL Math, Here Builder, Happy Numbers, Spelling City, Art Hub, News ELA, Starfall, Mystery Science, and Mr. Math Blog. So all of those programs are being used by some teachers in our district. Of course, teachers don't use all of them at the same time. So on this first option schedule, we're calling it an AM/PM cohort. It has students phasing in by grade level groups. We're going to start off with week 1. All SDC students, TK5, would attend school all day in a small cohort. So they would be on campus all day. Also week 1, we would start with TK and K with an AM group and a PM group. The transition time in between the 2 groups would allow for cleaning and disinfecting. It would also allow teachers a 30-minute lunch time and also a 30-minute collaboration and prep time. This option 1 plan would allow for it would be a phase-in over 4 weeks with staggered start times and end times. The staggered times would lower the number of students entering and exiting school sites at any given time. Students and teachers in this plan would have 150 minutes of synchronous learning with the TK, K, and first grade students. Would have 135 synchronous minutes in 2nd and 3rd grade, and 145 synchronous minutes in 4th and 5th grade. During this time, teachers would be doing direct instruction for one group in the morning and another group in the afternoon. The synchronous minutes and the asynchronous minutes vary according to grade level based on the California Department of Education minimum instructional minute requirements. Option number 1 has the highest number of synchronous minutes of the 3 schedules and the lowest number of asynchronous minutes of the 3 options. The AM group would pick up their lunch as they left the school campus, and the PM group would pick up lunch for the following day as they entered campus. You'll see that the number of asynchronous minutes are fairly low for the TKK and the 1st grade, and fairly low also for the 2nd through 5th grade. The second 2 options are a variation of the first. Option 2 is different. Oh, I'm sorry, let's do pros and cons. Thank you, Ryan. So pros and cons for option number 1 would be it provides a gradual reopening, bringing students in phases. It would allow for us to address concerns and issues that came up and correct them when there's a smaller number of students on campus. There'd be less exposure for site staff. It would be sustainable for teachers and staff to provide daily instruction. The cleaning and disinfecting would be a smaller number of classrooms to start. There'd be no live streaming of classes. Students would have 5 days of instruction when their grade level returned to the site. It would allow primary grades and SDC students to return sooner and resume services and work on their foundational skills. Special education services would resume. Social distancing is attainable. Ingress and egress is greatly reduced as designated access points with phase-in plan. There'd be a balanced workload for teachers. They'd have one lesson that they would teach in the morning and in the afternoon. It'd be the same lesson. Majority of classes would stay intact. Lake Elsinore Unified School District employees with elementary age students would use the LEUSD childcare. Transportation would be available for special needs students, and lunch and recess would be non-existent. Now that can go in the pro or con column. For cons, we have the AM PM schedules may not be conducive to parent schedules. There'd be numerous requests for AM and PM that we would have to work through. Teachers' exposure would be increased to all students daily. Students would be working half day on their own. Students may experience a change in teacher, and teachers may experience a change in students. This is a typo. This option number 1 would take 4 weeks for all grade levels to return. It would be difficult for parents with elementary students in different grade levels. Distance learning would continue up to 4 weeks for some elementary students. Cleaning and disinfecting all classrooms when fully implemented in 1 hour may be difficult. Transportation routes for general education students would need to be suspended. There'd be no gathering of any kind, lunch, recess, or assemblies, and how to monitor bathroom usage would be an issue. So having gone through option number 1, if we go to option number 2, the only difference is the phase-in is over 7 weeks with 1 grade level coming back each week. So in the first one, we're doing grade spans where 2 grade levels are coming back. In option 2, it's 1 grade level per week. So that's fairly similar, and it would have the same pros and cons. For option 3, the number of synchronous minutes is lessened to 120, and the asynchronous minutes go up considerably. It's still an AM PM cohort, and there's no staggered start and end times. So all students would come at the same time and leave at the same time. The pros and cons, again, are fairly the same. Cons, again, it's 5 days for all instruction. There's no live streaming. There's less exposure because the teachers have half a class in the morning, half in the afternoon. Social distancing would be attainable. There's the ability to assign asynchronous work to individual students. Employees would use childcare. Special ed services would resume. No lunch or recess needed to be monitored. Transportation available for special needs students, and balanced workload for teachers. And very similar cons to earlier. The schedule may not be conducive to parent schedules. The requests for AM, PM would have to be sorted through. Teachers are exposed to all students daily. Students would work half a day independently, and in the third option, there'd be more minutes working independently. Students may experience a change in teacher, and teachers may experience a change in students. This phase-in would be 6 to 7 weeks. Difficult for parents with students in different grade levels. Distance learning continues for up to 7 weeks. Cleaning and disinfecting classrooms in 1 hour may be difficult. Transportation routes for general ed would be suspended. No gathering of any time, lunch, recess, or assemblies, and lunch and recess would be non-existent. So those are the three options that we've brought before the board for your consideration. Next to present our middle school schedule, we will hear from Dr. Alan Guevara, Assistant Superintendent, Administrative, Instructional Technology, and Support Services. Dr. Guevara. Dr. Guevara.
You're on mute.
Okay. I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Bihar for organizing the middle school committee and working collaboratively for the betterment of students. Dr. Bihar was able to organize a committee working with LETA to get membership for representation from several of our middle school sites and K-8 schools. What we'd like to do today is to show you two schedules that we believe have potential for you to consider. We will share the same pros and cons situation just as Rita posted. And the way that we're going to handle it is Dr. Bihar will share the actual schedule and walk you through it. I will then go back and share the pros and cons for you. And then if there are any questions, we can take care of that at that point. So Dr. Bihar, with schedule 1.
Thank you, Dr. Guevara. Sample number 1, pardon me. Sample 1 is a morning block schedule in which the school's students are divided into 2 groups. And to keep it easy, we just say Group A and Group B. On Monday and Tuesday, Group A would come to campus and they would see 3 teachers. They would either go on Monday to say periods 1, 3, and 5, and then Tuesday they would go to periods 2, 4, and 6. While they're in school, Group B would participate in school from home. As you heard from Rita Post, the difference between synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. If it's synchronous learning, then the students would be participating in class at the same time that the students that are in school are participating. And if it were asynchronous schoolwork, then they would be doing lessons separate from what was happening with the teacher, that the teacher is doing with the students that are in person with them. The schedule then flips on Thursday and Friday, and Group B comes to school, similarly doing periods 1, 3, 5 on Thursday and periods 2, 4, 6 on Friday. Similar situation for the Group A that's at home, whether they're doing synchronous learning with the teacher in the class that's in person, or asynchronous where they're doing work separate from the teacher. On Wednesday, the students would not be on campus. It would look very much like education did today, literally today, where it's distance learning and students would be with all 6 of their teachers during Wednesday. This model does allow for us to meet the minimum requirements. As you heard Rita say, there are minimum requirements that the state has put out. And for middle school, students are required to receive 240 minutes of instruction per day. And as you can see in the schedule, they would be in each class when they're physically present on school. They would be with teachers for 80 minutes per class, which does equate to 240 minutes. There's also some time at after lunch. So when students go home at approximately 12 o'clock, they would do the grab and go lunch, they would head home, and then the teachers would have what we have outlined here as 45 minutes for them to do virtual extended learning time with any and all students. So they could do small groups, they could reach out to their students who have special needs, they could reach out to their students that might be struggling or provide some intervention, they could reach out with their English learners, they could be doing quite a bit during that time to add to what the students, to help the students meet their needs. So that's the crux of this one. Students would only be in 3 classes per day. So this is a morning block schedule, and it does allow for us to clear the campus each day at approximately what we'll call lunchtime, approximately 12 noon. And then we have the rest of the afternoon to clean and sanitize. So I'll give it back to Dr. Guevara, and he can talk about some of the pros and cons with this one.
Thank you, Dr. Bihar. On this, we see some of the pros would be, if we can go back, Ryan, and stay on the schedule. If we can show that we have extended learning time that he discussed, the 12:55 to 1:40, we see that there's 45 minutes for smaller intervention groups. So that's a definite pro. Teachers can work with smaller groups of kids that need the extra support. Again, another pro would be that we have the instructional minutes that were mentioned, the 240. It is the minimum number of minutes that can be had, but it does meet the requirements. The schedule is fairly easy to follow, which will be important to our parents and our students. And the classes are long enough so that you can have labs, extended work. 80 minutes will give teachers, like in the science class, the opportunity to do a lab with that long of a period that we don't typically have. The other pro would be have a possible time to record future lessons. The teachers are done with students by 11:55, and then they have a lunchtime there. But at that point, the teachers would have the ability to record future lessons and things for students. They still have half a day left at that point. Teachers and students can stay at home and continue doing their distance learning. So we have the ability for both, for whether, as Tracy mentioned, some teachers that will need to continue from home and some students that will want to continue from home. The grab and go, again, helps us not have students at lunch and congregating. And we'll have time daily for disinfecting. Again, by noon, we'd be able to start disinfecting the entire school because, again, students would no longer be on campus. Some of the cons would be that the workload of the teacher may be greater in this situation. Could be a lot of back and forth for students with multiple children because of the time schedules. If they have middle school or high school, that would be something that they'd have to be running their kids back and forth, something to consider. Disinfecting the desk between the periods in this schedule is not possible at this point. And if teachers do not deliver live engagement for the students at home, then the students would only receive asynchronous instruction for that day. And again, just as a reminder to the board, asynchronous learning is, as mentioned before, is the teacher is providing new information that's not an extension of their lesson, but actually new information shared with the students that they haven't been taught. So during that asynchronous time, we would have to make sure that we would have a way to collect the data of what is going on during that time to help support the number of minutes. We have to make sure we stay within that 240 minutes. Dr. Bihar, Schedule 2.
And if I could just clarify 2 quick things. One, as we heard from Mrs. Post with special ed, regarding students with special needs or our STC classes, many of those students would be coming to school 5 days a week in both of these models. And as she stated, the transportation would be provided for those students as necessary. And then as far as not being able to disinfect a classroom in between each class in that first schedule and in the second schedule, we won't be able to fog the classroom using the device that we saw Jim Ujevich show us earlier, but we would have the opportunity to clean desks and clean high-touch surfaces. Yeah. So just a little clarification on that. For sample two is a different looking schedule, and it's what's called a 3x3 block, or what we're referring to as a 3x3 block. And when it says by quarter schedule, what this is saying is that we would have students would only attend 3 different classes for the entire quarter. So in the third quarter, the students would only, in this model, they would only attend their periods 1, 3, and 5. And they would not attend period 2, 4, and 6 until the fourth quarter. So when I say it's intensive, what it does is it doubles up. And the plan here is we would actually complete an entire semester's worth of work in 1 quarter. And then we would switch over to the other 3 classes for the fourth quarter. So students would be divided similarly into a group A and a group B. Group A would be on campus in the morning. And so in this model, you'll see they have 47-minute classes. They'll be on campus until 10:16 in the morning. At that point, from 10:16 till 11:31 is the time their students would have the grab and go lunches. They would head home. So group A would now be off campus. This would give us time to do a number of things. One, we do believe we could physically sanitize every classroom on a middle school campus during in an hour and 15 minutes. It will take some work, but we think we can do that. In between periods 1, 3, and 5, we would have to do something for wiping down the desks that were used twice, but we would do our best to separate out. And for example, if we have 36 desks in a classroom and we have only 18 kids, we only have to use half the desks. So half the desks should go untouched from one class to the next. We would have time to clean. During that time, while the students are leaving and while Group B is coming onto campus, teachers will have time for their duty-free lunch, but they will also have built-in collaboration time every single day. And during this time, they would be able to collaborate with one another. They could use this as additional time for their preparation. They could use it as additional time to reach out to students and follow up on communications from students and parents. And we saw this as being a nice benefit in the middle, which worked in a lot of ways. It helps us in a number of different ways. The one thing about this model is, again, we've heard the terms asynchronous and synchronous. When the students are on campus, it is synchronous learning. And when the students are not on campus, this model does have 90 minutes per day that students will need asynchronous learning time. And that would amount to 30 minutes per class. So for example, on Monday, students would be with their teacher for 47 minutes in period 1, but then that teacher would have to assign also 30 minutes of asynchronous learning that happens out in the afternoon. And then just the opposite for the afternoon group, they would have to have that learning happen in the morning. And that's a quick overview of that, but the big piece on this is to remember that in quarter 3, students will have 3 classes and teachers will only have to prepare for 3 classes. And then in quarter 4, it would be the other 3 classes. So with that, I'll hand it back to Alan.
All right. So some of our pros with this sample too is that students would be on campus 5 days a week, which we've heard from some of our parents that they wanted to either back completely or not. This would solve that problem. Now, the other schedule we had is 4 days a week with that virtual day in between. Teachers will have less classes to prepare each day, so they can focus for both students and for the teacher. They'd be able to actually focus on just 3 classes and then complete those classes so that the next term they'd be able to look at those. There'd be no lunch period on campus, which again, for congregation reasons, it'd be good not to have the students there. Daily teacher collaboration time is built in. There's that 75 minutes where they have not only lunch, but they're going to have the opportunity to collaborate with their colleagues. And time to disinfect between Group A and Group B is also a pro. One of the cons would be that some of our classrooms may not be able to be disinfected between class periods in the same way. They would not be able to be fogged, but we would be able to clean high touch areas such as desks and doorknobs. With only 3 courses per quarter, one of the cons could be that the students would lack the necessary skills, because if I have Algebra 1 first period and it's in the 3rd quarter, I may not remember that material in the following fall when I need to apply it for the next sequential level of math, because I haven't had it for the whole year. I've only had it for that period of time. So that again could be one of the cons. And lastly, the asynchronous learning time is 30 minutes per day per class. Again, just keep in mind that that would require some record keeping that we would not have to do with just synchronous learning. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thanks. 1 second. At this time, I'd like to have Dr. Meyer discuss district learning, distance learning summary and the results to continue on to Keith McCarthy. So, Dr. Meyer?
Thank you, Alan. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Brian Dice, our high school curriculum and instruction director, who facilitated a committee of teachers and administrators to review several high school schedule options, which have allowed each person to offer their input. These upcoming decisions will be critical to the success of our students and staff, and their continued collaboration will be vital to our collective success. Regarding the high school schedules, though, as previously stated, it's the district's goal to return all students back to traditional classes with their teachers as soon as possible, but once health conditions allow and safety measures have been fully implemented. As we continue to work together, staff must continue to make decisions that are not only based on the safety of our students, staff, and families, but we also must look at options that are sustainable and flexible to adjust to the current health conditions that we will face from now until the end of the school year. Having high school students returning to an in-person instruction during the middle of this semester would be extremely disruptive to not only student schedules, but also to their high school graduation credits, dependent on the learning model that is to be implemented. No model will be perfect. There are significant obstacles in each model, but as the district continues its partnerships with staff and families, the district will be able to offer a schedule that best matches student need. A huge thanks to everyone who has provided input on this high school schedule template. Brian Dice, our director, will now present the high school schedule. Brian.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. We have been working, as already pointed out, with a group of administrators from the 3 comprehensive high schools, as well as teachers and a counselor from those same high schools. And as we've been progressing through this and reviewing different schedules, we've been trying to keep in mind, obviously, the restrictions that we have in place from the health departments, but also what we're hearing from our teachers, what we're hearing from our students, and what we're hearing from our parents. The one I would like to show today, amongst the ones that are going to be shared with the board, is very similar to what the middle school was looking at as sample 2, and that's a 3-by-3 block schedule, where in 3rd quarter students would be attending the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd period, and in the 4th quarter they would be attending 4th, 5th, and 6th. We would start our day as normal at 7:30 on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, with 1st period, 2nd period, 3rd period for the A group from 7:30 to roughly 10:25. Those would be 55-minute classes. One of the things that we considered with that is those classes are very similar in length to what we would normally have if we had everybody back on campus into our regular environment. We also were taking consideration that what we're hearing from students and from teachers is the workload. And by focusing on 3 classes a quarter, then the workload should be lessened for our students with 55-minute periods like we would normally have during the school year. That also will help the teachers understand and better prep for that period and better plan for that. We then would have a student dismissal at 10:25, and we would not reopen again as far as students until 11:35. That will allow the students to be dismissed in an orderly fashion, grab-and-go meals, and then the teachers would have a duty-free lunch and collaboration and planning time. One of the things that we discussed as we were reviewing this is with this at a high school we teach 6 periods a day. Each teacher does 5, and they have a conference period. So since we're only doing 3 periods in the first quarter, or third quarter, excuse me, teachers who have a conference period 4, 5, or 6 will not have a conference period. So by allowing and including collaboration and planning time, that will support those teachers who do not have a conference period during that quarter. And then of course it will flip in the fourth quarter. Those teachers that have a conference period 1, 2, or 3 would have the planning time, but would not have a conference period, and 4, 5, and 6 would have their conference period. We would then change to our B cohort. They then will also go through their classes in case of quarter 3, they would go again to 1, 2, and 3. There'd be asynchronous time for each day. To get to the 240 minutes we're required to have by the state, we would need to have 25 minutes of asynchronous for each period that the students are with us. So there'd be 75 minutes total for each student. As the A group is on campus, the B group is at home working on the asynchronous. And then when the B group is on campus, the A group is home working on the asynchronous work. You'll see some difference there on the Wednesday schedule. We have the standard PLC time of 7:30 in the morning, with students beginning at 8:35, which then pushes everything down. But we still finished at 2:30. At the end of the B group, on all 5 days, just like at the end of the A group, will be the grab and go meals. So the students will be leaving school with their next meals of breakfast and lunch. As far as the pros and cons, the A and B cohorts will all be on campus 5 days a week. We felt that that was great for our kids. It's certainly what a majority of our parents are asking for. It also gives them an opportunity to be physically with their teachers. While there is no lunch on campus, there's no break on campus, they will be able to interact with students in the classroom, their fellow students in the classroom. And all students receiving that live instruction interaction 5 days a week. Now, one of the things that we were looking at, and actually came up in one of our previous meetings, a teacher brought up a concern about what about these students who are in AP classes and they are either requesting to stay online or they have to stay online. How do we support those students? How do we keep them in those schedules, those important classes? Whether it's be IB, AP, career technical education classes, our Health Medical Careers Academy. We have a lot of classes that would be impacted and students would be impacted by that. So one of the things that came out of that was a request to our administrators, our principals, to start to talk to those teacher groups and ask them about what can we do to keep our kids who are going to be 100% online when we do the hybrid, still connected to their school, still connected to their classes that are on campus. Every group that would have met with the principals so far have made it very clear they want those students to be part of their class. They don't want those schedules to be changed for them.
Unmute.
This is like your day at school every day.
There we go. I'm back to unmuted.
Oh,
So I'll go. I'm not sure where I left off, but the teachers have said they want their students there. They want their students to be part of these classes. They want them connected to the school. So the next conversation was, how do we make that happen? One that came out was discussed by teachers was the idea of live streaming, so that those students that are home can be part of that class period. We are also looking at other options to keep them as part of that class. So we are looking at lots of different options for that, but our goal is to do that for every one of our students. Students taking another positive of that, either live stream or some other option that we're exploring, there'll be no schedule changes for students and there'll be no assignment changes for teachers, because all teachers will still maintain their status at their school, at their home school, with the same students they've been teaching all along this school year. I already mentioned before, students are taking 3 classes at a time. That's going to help with time management during these unusual times that we have. All students will stay with their home school if we can provide that opportunity for them. There's certainly going to be an instructional equity in the fact that students will have not quite the exact same experience, but will have access to their teachers and to other classmates. And then 35 minutes of collaboration and planning time for all built into the schedule. So there's extra time there available for them. And of course, while this could be a pro and a con in these times, and when we're talking the sizes that we have at our high schools, no on-campus lunch is more for us as a pro. When you keep in mind that our largest high school will have about 1,100 to 1,150 students on campus each day. In each cohort, they will have 2,200 kids or so on campus each day. So to be able to socially distance that many students in an environment where there's no, it's wide open, the campus is wide open, is next to impossible. So having no on-campus lunch is certainly going to be a benefit for that. Some of the cons that we're seeing is there might be some possible confusion of, exactly where am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to be in I'm used to going to 3rd or 4th, 5th, and 6th. Why aren't I going? We'll make sure we'll have a calendar and communicate that regularly out to the students. Already mentioned either Q3 or Q4, a teacher would not have a conference period. That's why we built in some of that planning time. Could you scroll up just a little bit more, Ryan? There is going to be 405 minutes of asynchronous time per week. The positive part, how that is broken down though, is it's 25 minutes per period. So where in other models, we were looking at possibly 40 to 60 minutes per period. The 25 minutes is going to be much more manageable. And then possible issues that we've already started exploring is how, if we do live stream as the option to keep our kids on our campuses virtually, then there's certainly going to be some need for technology in the classrooms. We're going to have to increase our bandwidth. We're going to have to look at what are options as far as cameras to project to the home audience, microphones so that everybody can hear. A number of different things that we've already started discussing. Teachers brought that up as concerns. What's that going to look like? And honestly, it's going to look differently for each. Could look differently for different teachers. Teachers who are more comfortable standing in place can be using the camera off of their device. Others who move around more, we're going to have to look at how we do that. So this is going to be a learning experience over this time between now and start to figure out the best options for our teachers and our students. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Meyer.
Thank you, Brian. Next, to review the recent distance learning summary results for those families who preferred the 100% distance learning, I'll now turn it back over to Dr. Kimberly and Dr. Bihar.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. I think we've heard earlier some confusion in regards to the survey. And rather than go over results that are somewhat mixed and complicated, I would like to take a minute just to clarify that what Keith McCarthy Academy would do in order to facilitate distance learning. That our current teachers at our elementary, middle, and high schools would also have to move to Keith McCarthy to facilitate that if we don't stay at our current school sites. It is our goal to keep our students and kids together if possible and have as few disruptions to the academic program as possible. But I think it's important for parents on this call and in this meeting to realize that our teachers and students go together in distance learning, no matter where it's housed, is somewhat inconsequential. With that, to discuss our high school athletics and extracurricular programs under the draft reopening plan, we'll once again ask Mr. Dice, Director of Secondary Curriculum, to give us a quick overview of extracurricular activities and athletics. Mr. Dice?
As far as the reopening, thank you, Dr. Kimberly. As far as the reopening of athletics activities, We're guided by a couple different outside agencies. We have to, CIF creates a sports calendar, which is going to be definitely a different experience this year. And then also what's happening health-wise in the county, whether or not we're in red or orange or purple, it's going to dictate what we're doing. We began in phases with phase 1, where students could come in pods of 10. They all started, before they started any kind of activity, they were screened as far as temperature and other issues. We now are jumping into, we jumped into phase 2 yesterday. And by Monday, all of our high schools will have their athletic teams in phase 2. And then we're going to continue to reopen as we get to the schedule, to the start of the CIF's schedule. And that'll be it for me. Dr. Kimberly?
Thank you very much. I think we've seen the complexity of the reopening under the state's COVID-19 guidance. Schools were not designed to be places of social distance. As we move forward, the hallmarks will be, first, the safety and health of all staff and students and our community. We're a multi-generational organization. We touch generations of families, grandmothers, aunts, and uncles who come into contact with our kids. So we have a great reach throughout our community. Second, to provide academic opportunities and consistency for kids and teachers whenever possible.
God, you guys are the most efficient people on this planet, I swear.
And third, consistent review and monitoring of ever-changing situations, local and countywide. With that, thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Dodd.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Kimberly. Well, we've all just heard how complex reopening schools is going to be, right? And the board and I want to commend you and the administrative cabinet and our negotiating teams for all your hard work trying to prepare us for a safe reopening. Of course, our #1 priority is providing a minimally disruptive reopening with maximum safety for students, families, and staff. And that being said, the reopening of schools to in-person instruction is wholly dependent on the Riverside County's COVID-19 status staying in the red tier or better. So this week, Riverside County passed, just barely, a 14-day wait period to determine if the county can stay in the red tier. So Dr. Kimberly, you had said that for schools to safely reopen, there are a few things that need to happen. So first, the board must approve a school reopening operational plan for the 2020-2021 school year. And then second, parents and staff need to see our recommended student schedules and learning models as soon as possible. So Dr. Kimberly, will you please provide direction to the staff to make sure that that information gets out to our parents as soon as possible? Third, we need to survey all of our parents and guardians to determine which students will continue with 100% distance learning and which prefer in-person instruction when schools reopen. And finally, please direct staff to prepare for a meeting in 2 weeks, let's say October 22nd at 4 o'clock to finalize the learning model preferences that we'll receive from the surveys, student schedules, a reopening timeline, and our final school reopening plan. So before we take a roll call to approve the draft reopening operational plan for 2020-2021, is there any discussion from the board